grotesque from the real world, combined it with the overheated seduction of a romance novel, and came up with a story for the ages.
Tell me, Prince. Tell me of your home.
But it was very much of its time. Stoker tapped into the anxieties of the day. When he wrote about Dracula and frightening exchanges of blood, Victorian London was in the grips of a deadly syphilis epidemic.
It lets us look at unpleasant realities in the world without having to look at it too directly. And I think that's one of the enduring functions of horror in literature and entertainment.
It was also a time when London was gripped by a threat of a very different nature. The bloodthirsty killer, Jack the Ripper.
Two of the most famous monsters in history prowled the foggy, gaslit streets of Victorian England. They emerged from the fog, they shed their victims' blood, and they disappeared again. One of them was a real person, a homicidal maniac who we've called Jack the Ripper. The other was a fictitious vampire named Dracula.
The novel Dracula just might be the publishing success story of all time. But Bram Stoker never lived to see it. He thought he'd be remembered for a biography of England's most famous actor of the day, Henry Irving.
If anyone who knew Stoker and Henry Irving in the 1880s or 1890s were told that 100 years hence, everyone would know who Bram Stoker was, and no one would know who Henry Irving is, no one would have believed you.
But the thing that has truly given Dracula eternal life, apart from blood, is the movies. Nosferatu was the first major Dracula movie, but it almost didn't get made. Bram Stoker's widow tried to shut the project down.
She was very serious about destroying Nosferatu. She was as serious as the characters in Dracula were about destroying Dracula.
The movie survived, just barely. Today, it's a classic of the silent era.
It's ironic that Nosferatu is in some ways the closest to, at least visually, the closest to what Stoker seems to have imagined his vampire to be, because Stoker's wife ended up suing F.W. Murnau for copyright infringement and won, and nearly all the copies of that film were destroyed.
This guy was no matinee idol. But more than any other movie, Nosferatu stayed true to Bram Stoker's vision.
A lot of people think Dracula is this handsome, suave, debonair man, and he's not. He's frightening. So, he is human, but he's pretty inhuman the way he looks. He's got gnarly teeth. It doesn't say he has fangs, but it says he's got pointed teeth, and he smells funny, and he's a walking corpse.
It would take a Hollywood sensibility and a Hungarian accent to turn Dracula into a suave superstar.
I am Dracula.
Bram Stoker probably wouldn't recognize him, but this is the iconic Dracula, and no doubt will be for all time. For the look, for the voice, for the tude, we can thank a Hungarian actor named Bela Lugosi.
He learned his roles phonetically, one syllable at a time, without necessarily understanding their meaning. And the result was that very deliberate manner of speaking. Listen to them, children of the night. What music they make. This is a voice you never forget as long as you live.
Dracula and other monster movies hit their stride in the 1930s, when Americans faced the grim reality of a real-life monster, the Great Depression.
I don't think they would have been so popular if they had been introduced to the public in sunnier times. I mean, there was no social safety net. These monster figures became almost lightning rods for free-floating cultural anxieties.
Moviegoers related to Dracula's frightful, life-draining power. Producers related to his box office power.
What was he, this being half human, half what?
When Lugosi died, he took his famous role with him to the grave, literally.
He actually wore his Dracula makeup and costume to his grave in 1956. I think it's one of the few times a performer has been so identified with a specific role.
Bela Lugosi's Dracula was a product of his time. Since then, generations of stars have cut their teeth playing the vampire count, each bringing something new to the part.
A creature who destroys all whom he touches.
But the biggest changes in the vampire world happened after the seismic culture shifts that started in the 1960s.
You have vampires who are romanticized and eroticized, of course, as well, and who are ambivalent figures rather than absolutely evil figures. And I think